After the 71st birthday dinner my children threw for me, I smiled as I tidied up the cake and flowers, my heart full of gratitude. I thought maybe I was still lucky to be loved at this age. But when I went back to the living room to grab the shawl I'd forgotten, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice slice through me like a cold knife. "It's time to dump her in a nursing home. They know how to handle senile old people there. When she dies, we split the estate evenly." I froze behind the kitchen door, hands shaking, listening to a pen scratching on paper, tallying percentages beating in time with my racing heart. The others just nodded, calm as anything. There's a very good place in Lisbon for someone like Mom. The whole house, the place where I'd rocked my babies to sleep and cooked our first family meals, suddenly felt like a cold courtroom. My throat tightened, my breath strangled by the fading scent of birthday flowers. Quietly, I switched my smartwatch to record ending 2 years of playing the gentle, compliant mother. They had no idea that this warm birthday night would launch a counterattack that would end with them paying the price behind bars. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. I'm Sylvia Carver, 71, a widow living alone in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Portland, Maine. I taught English for more than 30 years and always believed family was the safest harbor in life. After my husband Richard passed, I poured all my love into our 2 children, Derek and Alana, and tried to treat my daughter-in-law and son-in-law like my own. I'm simple. I love my backyard garden, I bake apple pies, and I reread old novels at night. People see me as a gentle, fragile mother, living quietly in old age. What they don't know is that behind that softness is a seasoned woman, clear-headed and steady enough to make those who betrayed her pay. I stood in the dark a few more minutes, listening to the slick words coming from the very people I had birthed, raised, and protected all my life. Derek, my eldest, sounded like a stranger. If Mom hesitates tomorrow, I'll have Dr. Nolan certify that she's no longer competent. Brittany let out a dry little laugh. Good, the sooner the better. I already booked tickets to Lisbon. We just need the signatures. I looked at my trembling hands. They once shook from holding Derek when he burned with fever, from mending the sweater Alana wore to her first Christmas program. Now they shook from fearing those same children. I slipped away from the kitchen doorway, walking lightly so the floor wouldn't creak. Even the old wooden walls seemed to be holding their breath. In my small bedroom, I turned on the lamp and took out my worn notebook. It used to hold recipes and retirement plans. That night it became a ledger of sins. I wrote down every word I'd heard, afraid that by morning I might not believe they'd actually said it. Send Mom to Lisbon. Split the estate evenly. Medical power of attorney is done. I wrote as if each stroke of ink were a lifeline pulling me back from the edge. When the clock struck 12, I took a small USB from the desk drawer, plugged it into my smartwatch, and downloaded the recording. Every laugh, every word, every greedy breath, they were all captured. Derek thought I'd forgotten the safe code, but I created it. Quietly, I opened the safe in my room and checked. My wedding ring box, the house deed, and a handwritten letter from my late husband, Richard Carver, who left me 8 years ago. He once wrote, "If one day this house no longer feels like home, stay calm. The truth is always the ally of the decent." I smiled faintly. "Richard, I think it's time I used that." Near midnight, I heard a soft noise downstairs. I crept to the stairs, hid behind the wall, and saw Derek opening the secondary safe in the study, the one where I kept a few keepsake pieces of jewelry. Brittany stood guard, lighting the way with her phone. "Take it all. She won't need it tomorrow," Brittany whispered. I clenched my fists until my knuckles went white. I wasn't a mother to them anymore, just an obstacle between them and money. The next morning I pretended to wake late, eyes puffy like an insomniac old woman. Derek knocked on my door, voice airy. "Mom, Dr. Nolan will drop by for a checkup. Just routine." Routine. The word sounded like a sentence. I nodded lightly, smiling, hiding the fury boiling in my chest. Once they left, I opened my old laptop. The password still worked. In my email, I wrote to my former attorney Renee Park with an innocent subject line, "Roof insurance check." In the body, I wrote one line, "I need to see you as soon as possible. Urgent. Don't call." I printed every bank statement, noted the credit card numbers and the extra card Derek once talked me into opening, then sealed it all in an envelope and hid it in the flour bin in the kitchen pantry. Derek and Brittany hate to cook safest place there is. That afternoon, when Alana stopped by, I heard her whisper to her brother on the porch, "Dr. Nolan signed already. All that's left is the tickets tomorrow." I stood by the window and watched their reflections in the glass. The late sun threw a pale gold over everything, but I felt cold as steel. That night, I checked the doorbell camera via the app. One by one, Derek, Brittany, Alana had entered my house with their own keys while I was away the week before. I saved all the clips to an external drive and laid it carefully next to Richard's letter. I spent the whole night building a timeline, my own reverse plan for my fate. Morning, they'll unveil the vacation gift. Noon, fake checkup doctor. Nolan certifies incompetence. Afternoon, flight to Lisbon. Tomorrow night, my house is no longer in my name. I taped that note behind our wedding photo where no one would look. At 2 a.m., I went to the living room. The birthday candles still smelled like burnt wax. Balloon scraps littered the floor. I looked around every corner, held a memory. Derek's first steps, Alana at the piano, Richard hanging our family photo, and now it was all about to be sold off like old junk. I opened the safe one last time. The wedding ring box was gone. Derek must have taken it. I wiped my prints from the surface with a damp cloth, then locked it. Inside were only Richard's letter and a few stock certificates. I took the letter, kissed the shaky handwriting, and hid it beneath a loose floorboard in my bedroom, a slit where I used to stash loose change years ago. Outside, wind hissed through the old oaks. I stood at the window, staring at the night sky. No tears left. Only a cold steadiness rising in me, the calm of someone who knows peace sometimes requires a fight. I went back to bed and pulled the blanket to my chest. My watch still blinked, the recording saved. I smiled, the smile of someone who knows the game has turned. Tomorrow they'll think they're sending their mother on a vacation, but really, it'll be the first day of their self-destruction, step by step. Every piece of evidence, every word from their own mouths will walk them to the defendant's table. I closed my eyes, breathed deep, letting the wind sink with my heartbeat. My 71st birthday didn't end with a wish, it ended with a vow. I, Sylvia Carver, will not let anyone bury me while I'm still breathing. The next morning I woke to soft sunlight through the floral curtains I'd sewn 10 years ago. Coffee drifted up from the kitchen, mingling with light laughter. From the outside, it could have passed for a warm family morning, dutiful children fussing over their aging mother. But I knew those laughs weren't for me. I walked downstairs slowly, keeping my face serene. Derek wore a crisp shirt, Brittany arranged flowers, and Alana sat on the sofa holding a glossy gold envelope. "Good morning, Mom," Alana chirped, her smile stretched too wide. "We have a special gift for you. We want you to have a real vacation." I glanced at the envelope. Residencia Santa Luzia. Lisbon was printed in bold across the front. I knew exactly what it was. "In Portugal?" I asked lightly. "Yes, Mom," Derek said, feigning excitement. "The climate is great for seniors. There's medical care and activities. All you have to do is sign." I looked at the brochure showing a white building with sunlit corridors. The tagline read, "Where old age finds peace." I almost laughed. Even the place they planned to lock me up knew how to lie sweetly. "You think I need to go?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. Derek stepped closer, resting a caring hand on my shoulder. "Mom, you left the gas on last night. If Brittany hadn't noticed, the whole house could have gone up." I looked him straight in the eye. "Did I forget, or did someone turn it on first?" He blinked and looked away. Brittany slid in, voice as sweet as artificial sugar. "Don't misunderstand. We just care about you. You're not young anymore. They'll take care of you 24/7 over there better than staying in this old house. This old house," those 4 words cut like a blade. "This house is the result of a lifetime of work. Every teacher's paycheck I ever saved. It's memory, love, the legacy of me and Richard." In their mouths, it was just an old house. I set the brochure down and looked at all 3. "You've gone to a lot of trouble, but I'm still clear-minded enough to decide where I go." No one answered. Brittany's eyes flicked to Derek, like signaling the next move. Right then, Alana pulled a clipped stack of papers from her bag. "Mom," she said, "Dr. Nolan already signed. This is temporary guardianship, just to keep everything legal. Derek and I will handle things for you." Temporary guardianship, 4 words, and I could see the net already strung. I took the paper and scanned it. Under Dr. Nolan Pierce, the blue ink was fresh, dated yesterday right after my birthday party. I picked up the pen from the flower vase, pretending to hold it to the light to read better. Meanwhile, I memorized every detail: the font, the slant of the signature, the oval seal in the right corner. It would all be evidence. Handing it back, I kept a faint smile. Very thorough of Dr. Nolan, amazing how quickly he remembered me. Alana exhaled, thinking I'd softened. But in my head, the gears of a plan had already started to turn. Brittany clapped softly. "Great, I'll help you pack. You don't need to worry about a thing." I followed her upstairs, keeping my mild expression. My room, once scented with lavender and old books, felt oddly bare as Brittany rifled through drawers. "Take this," she said, pointing at pajamas. "And these, leave them. They provide everything there." I watched her hands, fingers heavy with rings, lift the valuable items one by one, the vintage watch, the gold bracelet, the jewelry box. I pretended not to notice and asked, "What about those papers?" "What papers?" Her tone turned wary. I pointed to a desk drawer where I'd deliberately left a folder labeled Asset Authorization. Brittany opened it at once, eyes lighting up. Inside were old utility bills and bank flyers. She laughed and shook her head. "Why keep all this junk, Mom? I'm old. I keep it to remember," I said softly. Inside, I smiled. First trap sprung. Near noon, the doorbell rang. Derek called from the kitchen. "Dr. Nolan's here, Mom." I drew a long breath and went downstairs. Nolan Pierce, the doctor I'd trusted for more than a decade, stood in the living room with a black briefcase. He smiled politely. "Good to see you, Mrs. Carver. You look a bit tired today. Just a few quick questions." He took out a printed questionnaire. His voice was flat, mechanical. "What day of the week is it? Can you read your home address? Do you know who the current president is?" I answered clearly, steady and precise. He nodded vaguely, slashing his pen across the page, barely looking at me. When he went to sign the last page, I tilted my head and asked mildly, "Dr. Pierce, did you review my MRI from last year? The one you signed stating my memory is completely normal." His hand paused. Just a second, but enough for me to see a flicker of panic. I'll look into that," he stammered. "No rush," I smiled. "I just want to be sure you remember your longtime patients." Behind him, Brittany shot Derek a quick look. Both stayed silent. The exam ended fast in a stiff silence. Nolan signed, snapped his case shut, and left without meeting my eyes. As the door clicked, Derek turned to me, rushed. "The flight leaves at 4 p.m. You should have an early lunch and rest." "So soon?" I asked lightly. "Tickets already booked?" I just want everything to go smoothly, he said, evading my gaze. Brittany rolled a small suitcase upstairs, packing a few outfits, a notebook, and random items, enough for the first few weeks. I noticed every valuable thing from jewelry to documents had been removed. She zipped it closed and smiled wide, like a cut. All set, Mom. They'll take great care of you. You just rest. I nodded. I will rest, but not for long. When they left, the room went quiet. I sat on the bed, looking at the tiny suitcase, the sum of what they thought should be my remaining life. I laid my hand on the cold metal latch. Under the calm, I knew I wasn't a cornered old woman anymore. On the table, my smartwatch blinked the night's recording, already backed up to the cloud. I opened my laptop to check for Renee's reply. Nothing yet, but the signal was out. I stood, straightened the curtains, and looked at the backyard where I'd once taught the kids to plant sunflowers. The flowers still turned their faces to the light, as if they believed the sun always returns. I smiled faintly. Maybe I'm like them. In a few hours they'd think I was following the plan, but once that plane took off, I wouldn't be a forced passenger. I'd be ready for another journey, taking back justice with my own hands. The taxi had been waiting since 7 a.m. I heard the engine and smelled exhaust drifting through the window. Derek hauled the suitcase out first. Brittany did one last sweep of the house like a new owner. She paused at my wedding photo with Richard, tilted her head, and murmured to Derek, "We should sell this place soon, before prices dip." I gripped the stair rail so my hands wouldn't shake. Every slate step under my feet was Richard's handiwork. He laid each stone our first winter here. At the last step, I knew I was leaving not just a house, but 40 years of my life. "Let's go, Mom," Derek said softly, taking my elbow with polished tenderness. I smiled and nodded. No one knew that inside my sweater I'd sewn a small strip of fake hair hiding a slim USB with all their betrayals. As the car door shut, Brittany told the driver, "International Terminal, Gate 2. I looked out the window. The oaks in front swayed in the morning wind, leaves falling like a farewell. I fixed the image in my mind, not knowing if I'd ever see it again. The drive to the airport was 40 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime. Derek stayed quiet, checking his phone. Brittany kept instructing me, "Remember, Mom, someone from Santa Lucia will meet you. Your room is ready." I turned to her with a mild smile. "I know. You're very thorough." She missed the irony and nodded. "We just want the best care for you." At the airport, I was processed like a special assistance passenger. Derek held a thick folder labeled medical travel file and handed it to the passport agent, adding quietly, but clearly, "She's traveling for a health program. Everything's prepaid. Please help us get her on board safely." It sounded like I was fragile cargo. When they finished, Brittany leaned in and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'll call you as soon as you land, okay?" I looked her in the eye and said softly, "I'll be sure to call you right when I need to." She smiled, not catching my meaning, and walked away. On the plane, I had a window seat. The sky outside was a heavy blue-gray curtain. I took a tissue from my bag and held it to my mouth like a habit, really to cover my hands as I loosened the fake hair strip and slid out the razor-thin USB. In the dim light, I labeled the audio files with a tiny pen. 1. 71st birthday night. 2. Guardianship plan. 3. Dr. Nolan. Each title was a blade I'd hidden up my sleeve. I put my phone in airplane mode, opened email, and drafted an unsent message titled, "If I Disappear." I attached the first recording and saved it as a draft. If someone grabbed my phone, they'd see nothing unusual, but the data would be safe in the cloud. As the plane climbed above the clouds, I looked down at Portland one last time. Small streets, mist-topped roofs, the Kennebec River catching the light shrinking like an old photo pulled away from my fingers. I laid a hand over my chest, my heart beat slow and steady. No more shaking. I wasn't afraid. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. 8 hours later, we landed in Lisbon in a soft golden afternoon. The air smelled of salt and ripe oranges, a scent I once loved in my younger years that now tightened my chest. At arrivals, a middle-aged man in white uniform held a sign with my name, Sylvia Carver Residencia Santa Luzia. I walked up with a polite smile. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Luis, the center's coordinator. Happy to welcome you," he said, courteous and empty. "I'm sure you are," I said dryly. A small silver car carried me from the airport, past cobblestone streets and balconies draped with purple flowers. If not for the circumstances, I might have loved this city. But to me, Lisbon wasn't a new land, it was a gilded cage. Residencia Santa Luzia sits on a low hill overlooking the Tagus River. The building is bright white, glass walls reflecting the late afternoon sun, the orange grove fragrant. Everything is designed to look like a luxury resort, but all I could see were invisible bars. The manager, a tall woman with curled hair and a professional smile, welcomed me in the main lobby. "Welcome to Santa Luzia, where life begins again in peace," she said in fluent English. I answered softly, "Peace, huh? We'll see." She handed me my medical file and flipped through the pages as she read aloud. "Mrs. Carver, 71. Diagnosis: mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. Requires regular supervision." I closed my eyes and memorized every phrase. Mild cognitive impairment. Risk of wandering. That's the language that legalizes confinement. My room was number 207 on the second floor. The window faced the Tagus, where the sunset spread like honey on the water. Everything was clean: white bed, small table with a vase of oranges, beautiful to the point of empty. I opened my suitcase, just a few outfits, a notebook and an old coat. No family photos, no wedding ring, no letters from Richard. "You have a roommate," the manager said, pointing to the opposite bed. An elderly woman with silver hair was embroidering a handkerchief. She looked up, smiling kindly. "I'm Donna Teresa, 82. You just arrived?" "Yes," I said. "They told me this is a wonderful place to rest." She gave a small smile, eyes sad. "You get used to it. Everyone says that when they come." I nodded, but all I felt inside was a long stretch of cold. That evening they brought my first meal: pumpkin soup, bread, and a small pill on the tray. I asked, "What is this?" "Pill?" The nurse smiled. "Just a multivitamin. Helps you sleep." I didn't take it. I slipped the pill into my pocket and wrote in my notebook, "Evening pill, unknown contents." When night fell, the river's waves mixed with the light wind outside the window. I sat at the table and switched on the small lamp. Warm light spread across a blank page. I opened my notebook and wrote the first line, "Day 1, Lisbon. The taxi is gone, the house is gone, but I still have my memory and my evidence. Tomorrow, call Renee. Begin." I closed the notebook and let out a long breath. In the dark, Donna Teresa snored softly while I stayed awake. Every sound of the night felt like a countdown. I knew life in this beautiful prison would test my patience. I also knew that in every overbright corner of Santa Luzia, I would find a way out. I lay back on the bed and stared at the stark white ceiling. The smell of cleaner mixed with a sharp orange scent. I closed my eyes, but I didn't pray for sleep. I just repeated 3 words like a quiet vow. Remember, wait, strike back. Tomorrow morning, when the sun comes through the window of room 207, I'll start the next chapter not with tears, but with a first phone call. The fight to reclaim my dignity had started, and this time I'm the one holding the keys. The next morning, Lisbon's sunlight slanted through the window of room 207, lighting the white curtain as if nothing were sad here, but I knew light doesn't erase the feeling of being locked in. I ate breakfast in silence, the oatmeal already cold, the multivitamin warming in my palm with my body heat. I quietly tossed it down the bathroom drain, then opened my notebook and drew a line. Day 2. no pills. Around 10 a.m., I went to the nurse's station and offered a gentle smile. I'd like to make a video call to my granddaughter. She misses me. The young nurse, named Sophia, answered softly, "Of course, Mrs. Carver. The computer's in the common room, I'll turn it on." The old computer sat in the corner, silver-framed monitor, keys worn smooth. When Sophia stepped away, I opened the browser and typed the email address, only Renee Park, and I knew. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I typed fast, no accents, no greeting. "Renee, I'm safe. At Santa Luzia, Lisbon. They lied about my condition. Need urgent help. S." I hit send, then pretended to open Zoom to complete the act of calling my granddaughter. Not even 10 minutes later, a new mail chime sounded. I opened the inbox, and when the subject line popped up, my breath stopped. From Renee Park, subject, urgent reply. "Where exactly are you?" "Derek just brought your death certificate to the bank to withdraw all assets. They say you passed away in Lisbon." They didn't just want the house and the money, they wanted to wipe me from the legal record, as if I'd never been their mother. Have you ever seen a loved one treated cruelly just because they were old? Share how that felt in the comments, so voices like this aren't forgotten. I went numb. My fingers fell from the keyboard. The characters on the screen blurred. So they weren't only removing me from my home, they were erasing me from legal life. They buried me on paper. It took me nearly 5 minutes to breathe normally again. Once steady, I opened a reply and typed slowly, one word at a time. "Renee, listen closely. Temporary guardianship signed by Dr. Nolan Pierce, dated the day after my birthday. Sent to Lisbon was forced. Derek and Alana hold my passport. Brittany took assets. I have recordings. Freeze everything now. Sylvia." In less than 10 minutes, her response arrived. "You need to sign an emergency power of attorney so I can file for a protective order and freeze the accounts. I'll send an international form valid between the U.S. and Portugal with consular verification instructions." I printed on the center's machine. They didn't notice, signed all 3 copies, then asked Sophia to scan and send to my daughter in the U.S., really sending them straight to Renee. Renee replied right after, "Step 1 done. I've filed the freeze request. I'm sending in a colleague in Lisbon, attorney Miguel Duarte, to support you. Be cautious. Don't trust anyone there." I closed the computer, my heart still racing. In that moment, I knew I'd just reclaimed the most important thing, the right to exist on paper. At noon, the facility manager came into my room wearing a stiff smile. "Mrs. Carver, I need to verify your file. There are a few items to add." She opened her case and pulled out a thick stack of papers. I glanced over it. Passport copy, medical records, admission form, treatment consent. All bore my signature but not written by me. I feigned confusion. "I've signed so many forms, I don't remember. May I take another look?" She hesitated a few seconds, then nodded. I flipped page by page, eyes noting every detail, stamps, dates, and especially the line that read, "Mrs. Carver has moderate cognitive decline." I looked up. Which doctor certified this? "Dr. Nolan Pierce, your physician in the States. That's his original signature." I gave a thin smile. "Right. The same man who confirmed I was fine 6 months ago." She looked flustered, then hurried to gather the papers. "Either way, please rest assured. Your family loves you very much. They call every day." I tilted my head. "Do they? Then why haven't I heard them?" They said you need quiet." I smiled, the kind of smile you give when you know you're being lied to but pretend to believe it. When she left, I took out my phone, quietly switched on the recorder, and captured the entire meeting. Every sentence, every rustle of paper, any of it could be evidence. Near dusk, while I was walking in the garden, an older caregiver who seemed honest leaned close and whispered in halting English, "Your family told us, be careful because you are very confused. They said you already sold your house, so we shouldn't let you contact the U.S." I stood still, looking up at rows of ripe oranges releasing their scent. So this was the perfect plan. Lock me abroad, fake the medical file, then erase me from U.S. records. I gave a sad smile and told him, "Thank you, but I remember everything, every number, every word they said." He looked surprised, nodded, and quietly walked away. Back in my room, I photographed the entire Santa Lucia file, especially the page with the official seal, and sent it to Renee. I compared it with the copy Derek had sent the bank from the photo I'd taken at home before leaving. The two seals were completely different, one real, one fake. I knew once Renee had them, she'd have enough to file suit. That night I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool on my face, orange scent mixing with the bland smell of disinfectant. I opened my phone and started combing through social media, a habit I thought I'd dropped. Brittany Carver came up first. Her profile was full of photos, a new handbag, a fancy dinner, the caption, "Finally free." I curled a smile. Free, huh? She won't feel that way for long. Scrolling down, I found Alana's post. A photo of white lilies with the words, "Today, my mother left this world peacefully. Rest in peace, Mom." Dozens of people offered condolences in the comments. Someone wrote, "She was a wonderful mother." Reading those words chilled me. They had truly killed me, not with knives, but with words, with signatures, with a fake seal. I closed the phone and looked in the mirror. I didn't see a weak woman, I saw a face fully awake. I whispered to my reflection, "You want to bury me alive? Fine, I'll be the ghost that won't let you sleep." Lisbon's night was unusually quiet. Only the wall clock ticked each second. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Day 3 Portugal. Renee got the email. Miguel Duarte will come. Derek declared me dead. Alana cried online. Brittany spent money. They think they've won. They forgot. I'm alive." And I remember. I folded the notebook, set down my pen, and looked out the window. Moonlight glittered on the Tagus. "Richard," I whispered, "I promise you, the children you raised will face justice, not with rage but with truth." I turned off the light. In the dark, I felt calmer than ever. I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was someone hiding in the enemy's stronghold, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the clock hit midnight, I closed my eyes and smiled. Tomorrow, I'd meet Miguel Duarte. And then the curtain of lies my children built would start to tear piece by piece. The next morning, I was told I had a visitor. When I walked to the lobby, I saw a steady-looking middle-aged man in a light gray suit holding a black briefcase. He introduced himself in gently accented English. "Mrs. Carver? I'm Miguel Duarte, associate of attorney Renee Park. I'm here to support you legally." He showed a bar card from the Lisbon Bar Association. Everything looked proper and professional. I shook his hand, feeling a firm, warm steadiness, the exact thing I needed. "Renee filled me in," he said as we sat at a small table in the lounge. "I need to verify some data before we move to freeze the accounts. Here, you have the right to request access to your own medical and financial files, including admission records." I nodded. "I'll do everything. They used the law to bury me. Now I'll use the law to bring me back." Miguel smiled and opened his laptop. "Exactly." He walked me step by step into the patient portal, a tool I never thought I'd need. From there, we downloaded all admission charges, billing, and the medical proxy form Derek sent to Santa Lucia. Everything looked tidy, except for one detail that chilled me: my electronic signature. I zoomed in. Sylvia R. Carver appeared clear. The slant familiar, but it wasn't mine. I write with a slight left slant. This one tilted right. Neat to the point of mechanical. Miguel pointed gently. IP address of the signer 198.62.4.177. Ring any bells? I shook my head. He continued, "It's registered in Maine, right in Portland, and the address matches Derek Carver's home." A cold line ran down my spine. I looked up, my voice hoarse. So he signed for me. Exactly. Under federal rules, that's electronic identity fraud. Very serious. Miguel immediately sent the data to Renee. In under an hour, I got her reply, "I've filed an emergency motion to freeze all co-owned accounts. Banks in Maine and Boston have been notified. Derek can't pull another dollar. I've also requested a freeze on his secondary cards, including the medical credit card opened under your name." I read that line again and again, like breathing after days of suffocation. But that was only the beginning. Miguel slid his chair closer and opened another file. "Do you know this company?" On screen, Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, registered in Delaware. Owner, Derek Carver. Chief accountant, Connor Reeves, Alana's husband. I curled a smile. "A shell company." Miguel nodded. "Exactly. Started 8 months ago. I just found 3 transfers from your accounts totaling more than $480,000 flowing into this company within 2 weeks before you died on paper." I went quiet. The hurt was gone. Only a spreading cold remained. "They really did their math," I said slowly. Miguel clicked through screenshots from social media. Derek at a handover ceremony for a new boat, arm around Brittany. The caption, "Grateful for a fresh start." Another, Brittany trying on a diamond ring in a Boston store, smiling bright enough to blind. And Alana, my daughter, posting, her gleaming marble kitchen, finally finished a little dream. I looked at the images, not angry anymore, just empty. Motherhood supposed to be unbreakable, reduced to assets, shares, and balances. I folded my hands and said quietly, "Save everything. All of it. Every photo, every word." Miguel nodded and stored it all on an encrypted drive. He asked, "Anything else we should add?" I answered, "I have recordings, photos, and doorbell camera data from my house. We need to stitch them together. Prove they didn't just take money, they orchestrated the whole thing." That afternoon we worked for more than 3 hours. Miguel linked each chain of evidence: the birthday night recording, the forged signatures, Derek's home IP, and the medical expense payments. He called it a sealed chain of proof. "When this chain is tight enough," he said, "no lawyer will be able to save them." I nodded, feeling a bit lighter. For the first time since leaving Portland, I didn't feel alone. 2 days later, Miguel returned with news. I met with Santa Lucia's board. Once they heard about the false admission paperwork, they got worried. They're now willing to cooperate, handing over all records, audio, and camera footage. They don't want to be dragged into international collusion. I gave a small laugh. Finally, someone knows how to be afraid. He placed copies of what they'd sent: admission receipts, health status forms. In the medical history line, italicized, "Patient previously diagnosed with moderate cognitive decline per Dr. Nolan Pierce." Miguel looked at me. "Renee is preparing a court order compelling Nolan to release your real medical records. I expect results soon." That afternoon, I sat by the window, the Tagus breeze cool. A strange feeling spread through me, not hatred, but resolve. What I'm doing isn't just about money or reputation. I'm taking back the right to trust myself. 3 days later, Renee's email arrived. "Sylvia, we obtained Nolan's records. It's all clear. 6 months ago, he signed normal cognition. But the version Derek submitted says moderate decline. Signature date exactly matches the day Brittany booked the Lisbon tickets." In other words, they coordinated it, and Nolan knew. I read slowly, my temple pulsing. Everything fell into place. Brittany booked flights. Nolan signed a fake diagnosis. Derek moved money into a shell company. Alana announced a peaceful passing. A perfect chain if I were actually dead. Miguel looked at me, voice firm. You're not a victim now, you're the plaintiff. We have enough evidence. We just need time to finish the filings before we go public. I stared out at the Lisbon sunset on the river. The light stretched like a ribbon of melted gold. In that moment I thought of Richard, the man who taught me that every wrong leaves a trace if you're patient enough to follow it. Now I had all the traces. I closed the notebook and added one last line for the day. Day 8, Santa Lucia forged signature found. IP. Derek's house. Accounts frozen. LLC. Blue Ledge Ventures exposed. Nolan Pierce, complicit. The game has turned. When I finished, I put down the pen and lifted my head to the sunset. The breeze carried a hint of orange blossom, and I felt an odd calm. I don't need violence for revenge. I just need the truth to do its job, and it's doing it very well. That night before bed, I opened an old Christmas photo of our whole family. I looked at each of my children's faces and said quietly, "You chose money over your mother, but I choose justice over tears." Then I turned off the light and let darkness cover the room. In the silence, I could hear my heartbeat, no longer afraid, steady and firm, like someone becoming herself again. On my 9th morning at Santa Lucia, a knock sounded just as I was finishing my journal line. When I opened the door, Miguel stood there with the facility manager, her face stiff, her polite smile forced. "Mrs. Carver," she said in a gravelly voice, "we've reviewed your admission file. There are some serious errors." Arms folded, Miguel answered calmly. "Legal errors, to be precise. I've notified the consulate and Portugal's Ministry of Health. If the center doesn't want a criminal investigation, the best option is to let Mrs. Carver leave immediately." I watched the manager's face drain pale. After a few seconds of silence, she nodded. "Of course, we'll issue discharge papers at once. Reason: admission based on inaccurate information." 3 hours later, I received the official document, the red seal still wet. I set it on the table and looked at it for a long time, as if it were my first ticket to freedom after months of confinement. While I packed, my roommate, Dona Teresa, stood in the doorway, eyes wet. She held my hand, her voice trembling. "Do what we didn't dare. Seek justice for those buried alive here." I hugged her tightly. "I promise. And when this is over, I'll send you a card to prove we still have a voice." My suitcase was light, a few clothes, a notebook, and the USB stitched deep inside my sweater pocket. Miguel walked me to the car. Santa Lucia shrank in the rearview mirror, white walls, blazing orange groves. I knew I'd never forget that sweet scent, the smell of freedom laced with bitterness. The U.S. consulate in Lisbon sits on a leafy street, the American flag rippling in the noon sun. Stepping through the gate felt like walking back into the part of my life that had been cut off. Miguel introduced me to a consular officer, a young, solid woman named Emma. "We've been briefed on your case," she said. "We'll record this as international fraud, but first, we need to verify your identity and your cognitive status." I smiled. "I'm more than willing, as long as no one calls me incompetent again." The evaluation took over an hour. Memory, response, reading, writing, arithmetic. I answered clearly, even recalling Richard's social security number from 1989. When we finished, Emma smiled at me. "Mrs. Carver, I'll state in the report, fully lucid, fully aware of actions and circumstances. Welcome back to the legal status of your own citizenship." I smiled through tears. Every paper and seal today didn't just restore my name, they restored me. Miguel walked me out into the sunlight, glinting on his hair. "Renee just texted," he said. "A court in Maine has issued a temporary protective order for you and the property. All transactions to sell your house are suspended. They can't do anything further." I exhaled, like dropping a boulder from my chest. "So, I can finally go home." "Yes." He nodded. And when you're back, we'll let them step confidently into the trap they dug themselves. 2 days later, I boarded a flight back to Boston. For 10 hours, I couldn't sleep. Each engine vibration kicked my heart, as if I feared this was only a dream. When the wheels touched down, I gripped the armrest and breathed deep. The smells of coffee, exhaust, and melting snow wrapped around me. Renee waited at the international arrivals door. Without a word, she hugged me hard. Warmth spread through me, pushing out the months of strangeness. "We did it," she whispered, "and don't worry, I haven't told them you're alive." The quieter we are, the harder your punch. We left the airport in her black SUV. Boston lay under mist, buildings reflecting a pale green glow. I watched familiar signs and streets, the ones that had carried me to school and brought me home at dusk. "What's next?" I asked. Renee opened a thick file and smiled. "The bait plan. I've sent formal invitations to Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor Reeves, your son-in-law. Reason: a final. Supplemental inheritance closing at the notary office. They believe they're getting the rest of your estate." I nodded, lips pressed. "And I'll be the surprise gift at that meeting." Renee nodded, eyes sharp. "I've prepped hidden cameras, recorders, and a faux packet titled Irregularities in the Estate. We just need to tug at their greed. Once they speak for themselves, there's no walking it back." That night at a small hotel by the Charles, I looked in the mirror. My face was older, my hair grayer, but my eyes were different. No fear, only clarity and steadiness. I took scissors and cut my hair to my neck. Silver strands fell to the floor, light as old burdens. The next morning, I stopped at a glasses shop near the hotel and switched to round frames. I looked a few years younger. The clerk said, "You look much more energetic." I smiled. "Thanks. I'm about to see my family, after a fake funeral." Renee arrived with a new packet and a heavy silver gray coat. "Wear this," she said. "When you step into the room, the light will catch and they'll freeze." I nodded, took it, and asked, "Do you think I'll shake?" "You might," she said honestly. "So here's a trick. Breathing practice. Facing them, inhale through your nose for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Keep your heart rate under 80. Don't let them see you angry. You don't have to shout to win." That evening, I paced the room, walking slow and steady like someone relearning how to step into life. I pictured the notary door opening, 4 faces lifting eyes going dead when the dead woman walked in. Before bed, I wrote a letter, my hand shaky but firm. "Dear Richard, I'm about to do what would make you proud. Not revenge, but restoring the truth. If someday I don't get to say this, I've forgiven them, but I haven't forgotten. Forgetting lets lies live on. When this is done, I'll burn this letter." I folded it and set it beside the small notebook that had traveled with me the whole way. Outside, snow began to fall, whitening the street. I watched from the window, my breath fogging the glass. Tomorrow I won't be the woman forgotten in Lisbon. Tomorrow I'll return to my real name, Sylvia Carver, and the story they thought was over is just beginning. The notary office was on the 8th floor of a glass building in downtown Boston. Winter light slanted through the windows and bounced off the polished floor. Every detail was set: long table with a gray cloth, a hidden camera in a planter, 2 tiny recorders under the tabletop. The air was cold, still, and seemed to be holding its breath for the storm. Renee ran one last check, then looked at me. "You sure?" I drew a long breath, keeping the rhythm she'd taught me. "I'm sure. Time to show them the person they thought they buried doesn't die so easily." "Then let me start," she said, straightening her collar and stepping out. Leaving me to wait in the next room, thin door cracked just enough to see everything. Exactly 10 a.m. They arrived. Derek led, black suit, tight face, sly eyes dulled by lack of sleep. Brittany followed in a deep red dress, lipstick darker than usual, laughing with Alana and Connor as if this were a celebration. "I told you, just the last formality," Derek said loudly, full of confidence. "Renee said it's just a few signatures." "Thank God," Brittany replied. "I'm sick of lawyers reading every page." Alana, my daughter, nodded, but her eyes showed nerves. Connor, my son-in-law, held a folder, more awkward than all of them. Renee stood, wearing her professional smile. "Welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Today, as in the invite, we'll do a final review of the supplemental estate of Sylvia Carver." They sat. Chair legs scraped the floor with an ugly squeal. Renee opened her folder, voice light but firm. "Before we sign, we need to clear up a few inconsistencies in the legal file. First, the death certificate." She set a copy on the table, turning it toward them. "This is the version submitted by Mr. Derek Carver to Portland Trust Bank, dated April 16th. However," she placed another page with a fresh red seal, "this is the official confirmation from Residencia Santa Lucia, Lisbon, Mrs. Sylvia Carver was discharged on March 24th, fully lucid, and signed in her own hand." The room froze. Derek went rigid, face as pale as the paper. Brittany leaned toward the confirmation, voice cracking. "This must be administrative confusion. In Europe, their paperwork is messy." Renee raised an eyebrow, still calm. "Administrative confusion? I thought so too until I checked the digital registry. There's also video of Mrs. Carver signing her discharge." Alana covered her mouth. Connor stared down, avoiding everyone's eyes. Derek leaned forward, forcing steadiness into his voice. "Regardless, my mother, she was very weak. The center could have made a mistake." Renee nodded slightly, as if she'd been waiting for that. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up. On it was a social post. Brittany Carver in a white dress, smiling in a fancy restaurant, with a caption, "New Freedom, New Beginning." "This," Renee said slowly, "was posted March 25th, the exact day Mrs. Carver was taken to Lisbon." "Care to explain?" Brittany's throat closed. Her fist clenched, a chip flaking from her nail polish. "It was just a joke. A joke about freedom the day your mother-in-law died on paper?" Renee's smile turned cold. "Hilarious." Connor tried to interject, flustered. "I think we should stick to the inheritance process." Renee pivoted, voice sharp as a blade. "Then tell me, Mr. Connor Reeves, who filed the tax return for Blue Ledge Ventures LLC, a company funded with money withdrawn from Sylvia Carver's accounts." Connor opened his mouth with no sound. His throat bobbed, then rasped. I only did accounting support." "Derek said it was the family's investment fund," Renee cut in. "And you didn't find it odd that the fund launched right when your mother was declared incompetent and then dead on paper?" No one answered. Only the clock ticked and breathing grew loud. Brittany hissed at Derek. "You said everything was handled." "Shut up, I'm handling it," he snapped. That was my cue. I pushed the door. The hinge gave a small, eerie creak. 4 faces turned as one. I walked in, slow and steady on the wood floor. "I'm here," I said, voice calm but ringing. Very alive. And very clear. Time stopped. Alana burst into tears, hands shaking over her mouth. Connor's chair scraped back as he went pale. Brittany froze, eyes wide, then lunged for her phone, jabbing at the screen as if she could erase old posts. Derek, my son, swayed, bracing on the chair back, mouth open with no words. I stepped to the table and set down a small USB. The dry click sounded like a coffin tap. "Listen," I said evenly. "Listen to yourselves how you divided your mother that night." Renee hit play. The audio came through clearly, every laugh, every word. "When she dies, we split it evenly. And that jade bracelet, I'm taking it. Send her to Lisbon. They keep old people like prisoners there." Brittany's small laugh, Derek's hand slapping the table, and Alana's soft voice. As long as Mom doesn't suffer, I won't object." The room went still. None of them could meet my eyes. Only the recorder kept running, its red light blinking steady. I looked at each face, the ones I'd kissed goodnight, the hands I'd held through fevers now bowed like children caught stealing. I spoke slowly, firmly. "Do you remember? When Richard died, we promised never to let this family fall apart. Yet you buried your own mother. For money. You sold off trust, and now that trust will be the evidence against you." Brittany gulped. "Mom, what you heard? We were just angry." I gave a thin smile. "Angry? What about the fake death certificate, the fake accounts, and the new Freedom Post?" "Anger or calculation?" Derek finally found his voice hoarse. "Mom, we were afraid you'd be scammed, taken advantage of. I wanted to protect you." Renee let out a small laugh, the kind that waits for a line like that. "Really? Because the statements show you moved more than $480,000 into your own company." I looked straight at my son. "Remember what I taught you? Good intentions never need forged papers." The room sank into silence. Then click, the second recorder chimed, marking that the entire meeting had been captured. Renee stood, slid the USB into a sealed envelope. "Thank you. We're done. Everything you just said will be forwarded to federal court and the Maine State Police." Derek lunged up. "No!" "You can't." Renee cut him off, ice cold. "We can. Because your mother, the one you declared dead, re-signed all legal documents 2 days ago. She's the plaintiff. And you, unfortunately, are the defendants." I pulled my gaze back and turned to leave. Behind me, Brittany collapsed into a chair, sobbing into the ticking of the clock. Derek said nothing, gripping the table until his knuckles went white. At the door, I looked back once. "You claimed I wasn't clear-headed enough to manage my life. Today, I proved the opposite." Then I stepped into the hall. The door closed behind me, sealing in the smell of failure and guilt. Outside, winter light flooded everything. I took a deep breath and heard my heartbeat slow, steady, free. Their game was over. As for me, I was finally the one holding the cards. Police arrived the next morning. 3 black cars stopped in front of the notary building, lights flickering, softly on the glass. Inside the conference room, the air felt dense, like there wasn't enough oxygen. 4 of them sat in a row. Derek, Brittany, Alana, and Connor, each with a different look, but all with the same thing underneath. Fear, badly hidden under fake calm. Renee sat across from them, stacking documents neatly. I sat beside her, quiet, hands on the table's edge. In front of us, 2 officers and a representative from the Maine Attorney General's office watched. The formal confrontation began. Renee started by playing the recording they thought they'd erased yesterday. Brittany's voice came first, thin, sharp. "Sell the house, fast. If we wait, her papers expire, and we'll have to redo everything." Derek's voice cut in. "I've done the math. 60% from the house, 20% from savings, 20 from company shares. We split it, and no one says a word." Then Alana, shaky but clear, "As long as the guardianship has Dr. Pierce's signature, everything's legal." The words rang in the dead quiet room. I didn't look at them. I stared at the screen. Each sentence was a blade now driven back into the mouths that formed them. When the audio stopped, Renee said gently, "That was the first excerpt. Now, the financial evidence." She opened the second set. Bank statements, rows of numbers, transfers into Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. $480,000 moved from Mrs. Carver's accounts while she was under treatment. Here's the boat deposit for Derek, Brittany's diamond receipt, and bank login IP history from the Portland address. Sweat beaded on Derek's lip. I don't know about that. Could be a system error." Renee slid one more page over. "What about this internal email?" From Connor Reeves. Subject: Need to mask the transfers, code them as medical costs. Connor went chalk white, head down. I just followed instructions. Derek said it was temporary. Renee didn't answer. She signaled an officer to note it. I watched their faces crumple, one by one, the children I raised and taught manners, now ducking their mother's eyes like midday thieves. Suddenly, Derek shoved back his chair and dropped to his knees in front of me. Mom, we were wrong. We were scared you'd be alone, scared something would happen without us there. So we tried to control things. I looked at my son once, a source of pride, now a hollow ache. Afraid I'd be alone, I repeated, voice tight. So you killed me on paper? Forged medical records? Declared me incompetent? Then split the money? That's your version of love? He broke down, but I had no tears left to share. Brittany cut in, hissing through her teeth. I just did what my husband said. He said it was for your benefit. Renee gave a small smile and picked up a tablet, pressing play. Brittany in a living room, wineglass in hand, telling friends, finally no more toxic mother-in-law. I feel like a boulder's been lifted. The laughter in the video echoed around the room, harsh and cold. Brittany shot to her feet, face blazing. It was a joke. I didn't know anyone recorded it. The security camera in your home did, Renee said. And it was uploaded 24 hours before Mrs. Carver passed away. The room fell silent again. Only the sound of wind slipping through the door crack, the smell of fresh ink, and the tang of nervous sweat remained. Alana, my daughter, spoke through a tremor. Mom, I didn't do anything. I was just worried about the kids. If this blows up, they'll be affected. You love your grandkids, right? I looked at her, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. Which grandmother did you make them mourn, Alana? Their real grandma, or the shadow you created to legitimize your filings? Alana burst into sobs, but I didn't move closer. Those tears were no longer apologies, just fear as the walls of calm, lies collapsed. Renee opened the medical file and set out 2 versions, one original, one fake. Here is Dr. Nolan Pierce's signature on the real report diagnosis. Normal cognition. And here is the fake one Derek submitted. Moderate decline. If you compare the signatures, you'll notice something interesting. She placed the pages side by side. Even a person who couldn't read would see it. The handwriting was identical right down to the final ink dot. Renee only smiled. He used the same pen, the same handwriting, the same typo from last month's prescription. A sloppy doctor, a foolish scheme, and enough to put all 4 of you in prison. Derek clenched his fists, snapped. What do you want from us? Renee stayed calm. Not me, Mrs. Carver. I looked at my son, lowered my voice, each word dropping heavy. I want one thing, truth and justice. Right then, Renee's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then nodded to the officer. The freeze orders are now in effect. Every account, asset, and company tied to you is locked. The police are ready to take statements. Brittany shot to her feet, screamed, No! I have small children! I can't, the officer replied evenly. You'll be allowed to call an attorney. The air thickened. I sat still, watching each of them grasp at flimsy excuses. Alana collapsed into her chair, face in her hands. Derek fell quiet, eyes drifting. Renee turned to me and murmured, You can choose. We can push full criminal charges, or you can set civil conditions if you want to leave a way back. I thought for a moment. Then I spoke clearly. I'll choose the lighter path if they accept 3 conditions. She nodded, signaling the prosecutor to record them. I continued. 1. Repay every dollar taken. 2. A public apology in court and to the media, admitting wrongdoing. 3. Mandatory therapy for at least 6 months to learn what remorse means. The room went dead still. Derek looked around, then shouted like a plea. No, you want to humiliate us? I answered softly, but each word cut through the air. No, I want you to face yourselves. That's what I taught you, and you forgot. Brittany stood, voice choked. We won't apologize publicly. Do whatever you want, sue us. I held her gaze for a long second, then nodded slowly. Fine. Then I'll see you in court. Renee gathered the files and signed the minutes. The police began escorting them out one by one to take separate statements. As Derek passed me, he stopped, eyes full of desperation. Mom, if you do this, I lose everything. I looked at him, offered a small, aching smile. You chose to lose me first, Derek. This is just the consequence. The door closed. Only I, Renee, and the pale gold light through the blinds remained. I sat quietly, no longer angry, holding a feeling I could barely name, exhaustion mixed with peace. Renee rested a hand on my shoulder and said gently, You just won the first battle. I answered softly, No, Renee. I just won my name back. Winning or losing, that's the court's job. I stood and looked out the window. The snow had melted. Boston sunlight washed the building across the street. In that moment, I understood that sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a gavel strike. It arrives when the person buried alive stands up and says, clearly and loud, I'm still here. 2 months after the confrontation at the notary office, Boston was still cold, but I'd grown used to this kind of cold yet clear, like justice coming into focus. They hadn't. My entire family was now officially defendants in a case for fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and money laundering through Blue Ledge Ventures LLC. Things I used to only hear on the news had become my real life, Renee told me, calm but firm. Prepare yourself, Sylvia. The first hearing will be heavy, but what you say isn't for revenge. It's to end a chain of lies. I nodded. I didn't shake anymore. The indictment ran nearly 40 pages. First was Derek Carver main counts, forged notarization, asset theft, abuse of trust against an elderly person, and interstate money laundering. Then Brittany accomplice, evidence concealment, and profiting from fraud. Connor set up a shell company and helped legitimize the money flow. Alana indirect accomplice, but considered for leniency due to cooperation. And then the name that chilled me, Dr. Nolan Pierce, the man who once shook my hand in his exam room, smiling, You're still sharp, Sylvia, was now under a federal investigation list. The U.S. Medical Investigations Bureau found that within 8 months, he received 11 consulting fees from the shell firm Reeves Accounting, each exactly $7,500. Every payment matched the windows when Derek needed medical reports to finalize guardianship. Miguel sent me a memo, payments disguised as expert consults for elderly patients, no supporting medical records. Funds transferred directly from an account managed by CFO Connor Reeves. The American Medical Association immediately suspended Nolan. Former patients spoke up, saying he often copied diagnoses literally copy-paste from other charts. A 79-year-old woman said, He labeled me early dementia when I came in for joint pain. Reading that hurt and relieved me. It wasn't just me, many older people had been prey in a diagnosis-for-profit system. Derek hired an expensive New York attorney, a salt-and-pepper man with an oily, smooth voice. In front of cameras, he claimed his benefactor was a victim manipulated by a greedy wife. It was all Brittany, he said. She controlled my client's emotions to seize the mother-in-law's assets. Brittany hit back. She appeared in black, face wet with tears, declaring, Derek forced me to sign. I did it because I was afraid of him. I had no power. Connor, the quietest one, was nailed by his own emails. One line was read aloud in court. Don't worry, Derek. I'll mask that transfer under your mom's medical expenses. Running it through the LLC will cover it. Those words landed like hammer blows. Only Alana, my daughter, bowed her head and admitted it. During her statement, she said in a shaking voice, I knew they were wrong, but I didn't dare speak up. I was afraid of losing my family, my job. I just wanted Mom to be safe, the prosecutor asked. Safe by declaring her dead? Alana broke down. then signed a partial plea, handing over all family group emails and messages. When Renee showed me those emails, I sat still for over an hour. Some lines made it hard to breathe. Let her think it's a vacation. When it's done, she won't have any rights left. Sell the house fast before she changes her mind. Each word was a nail driven into me. Still, I signed to submit them to the court. Renee and Miguel worked non-stop. They compiled everything I had: journals, recordings, photos, and Richard's letter where he wrote, "All of this was built by Sylvia. I only added a little. The house and savings are the result of 40 years of her work." That letter in my husband's hand became a key legal anchor. Proof the assets were my separate property, not communal property my children could claim. The court granted temporary restitution and restraining orders. None of the defendants could contact me or come within a mile of me or my home. I walked back into my house, the old door creaked its familiar note, and for the first time in months, I felt true peace. A week later, Renee sent me the iCloud extraction from Derek's phone. There was an 18-minute video from our home camera the night I was taken on vacation. They stood in the living room, pulling drawers to inventory. Brittany said plainly, "I'm taking this bracelet. Sell the watch." Derek replied, "Write it all down so there's no questions. She won't remember anyway." They all laughed. Renee looked at me, voice low. "This is evidence of intent to misappropriate assets. There's nothing left to argue." I nodded gently, said nothing. What I felt wasn't anger, just a heavy sadness at how ambition can make people foolish. As for Nolan Pierce, the man in the white coat behind the paper trying to bury me, there was no exit left. The FBI found, beyond the 11 payments of $7,500, 2 larger ones routed through Blue Ledge Ventures marked consultation, legal coordination, Miguel explained. "That's how they laundered it," Nolan signs, "fake medical records. Connor pays under consulting. The medical board launched formal discipline. Dozens of patients filed complaints." On the evening news, cameras caught Nolan leaving court, white coat folded over his arm, eyes to the ground. I wanted to close that chapter, but justice doesn't let you soften too soon. Renee filed supplemental charges, falsifying medical records and conspiracy to defraud an elderly person. Nolan became a separate defendant in a second branch of the case. On the first day of trial, I walked in with my short silver hair and the gray coat Renee told me to keep because you look stronger in it. Across the aisle, Derek stared at me with empty eyes. Alana kept her head down. Brittany wouldn't look up. Connor stayed quiet. When the judge asked, "Mrs. Sylvia Carver, are you healthy and lucid enough to testify today?" I smiled and spoke clearly, each word etched in the air. "Your Honor, I'm 71 years old. My memory still serves, my eyes can still read, and my heart still knows pain. I'm lucid enough to love and clear-sighted enough to know when I've been betrayed." The courtroom went still. I told my story, no tears, no theatrics, just facts, day by day, act by act. I spoke about the birthday night, the pen-scratching percentages, the flight to Lisbon, and the moment I heard my own children say, "Split the assets when she dies." No one interrupted. Even the defense had nothing left to argue. When I finished, the judge said only one line. "To those who claimed Mrs. Carver was incompetent, you've just heard and seen the opposite." I turned to Renee. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "The strongest blow isn't revenge, Sylvia. It's standing steady before those who tried to crush you." I nodded. I knew justice had a way to go, but the hardest part I had already walked. The rest would be theirs, the ones who thought money could buy the truth. The morning snow fell lightly, white dusting the courthouse steps like winter's mourning cloth. But inside me it was a morning of light, no more pain, only clarity. More than a year after that fateful birthday, I entered court for the last time, not as the ward, but as the plaintiff who reclaimed her name. The gallery hushed as the judge read the verdict. His voice was low and firm. Defendant Derek Carver fraud, forged notarization, elder abuse, and interstate money laundering, 8 years in prison. Brittany Carver accomplice to fraud, aiding and concealing illegal assets, 6 years in prison. Connor Reeves accomplice to money laundering, establishing a shell company, falsifying tax reports, 5 years in prison, and barred from accounting for 10 years. Alana Reeves, indirect accomplice, cooperated with the investigation, suspended sentence of 3 years and 1,200 hours of community service at a Maine nursing home. I heard each number like dry knocks against the walls of memory. No joy, just the sense that fairness had finally been named. Then the judge continued. Dr. Nolan Pierce for falsifying medical records and conspiring to defraud an elderly person, permanent loss of medical license, suspended sentence of 2 years and civil penalties of $350,000. He is also ordered to issue a public apology. Reporters swarmed as court adjourned, wanting the face of the mother who survived her own death certificate. I said only one short sentence. Justice isn't for revenge, it's to remind us that trust isn't for sale. A week later, the court ordered restitution and civil damages. Derek's boat was liquidated, Brittany's diamond ring auctioned, and Blue Ledge Ventures assets seized. Everything converted to money, more than $3.6 million, including principal, interest, and emotional damages for me. When Renee handed me the check in an envelope, she smiled. "You didn't just get the money back, Sylvia. You got yourself back." I looked at the check, but felt only quiet. Not because of the number, because of being seen and restored as the truth. My house in Portland was restored too. I returned on a light, rainy afternoon. The old wood smell and dried cinnamon were the same. I changed the locks, the nameplate at the gate, and placed the new deed into a protective trust so no one, not even me, could lose it so easily again. That night I sat in the living room where arguments once echoed, where I once stood behind a door and heard my children plan to split the assets when she dies. Now there was only the soft tick of the fireplace and candlelight on my husband's photo. "Richard," I whispered, "I did it, and not with hatred." A month later, I accepted an invitation from the Maine Council for the Protection of Older Adults. They wanted me to speak at a community event to share my story as a warning. That day the hall was small but warm. Over 100 seniors listened closely, some holding hands, some wiping tears as I told the path I'd walked from a quiet birthday to a blazing courtroom. At the end of the event, an elderly woman, around 80, walked up and held my hand, trembling. "Thank you, Sylvia. I used to think I was foolish for not speaking up when my son controlled all my accounts. Now I know it's never too late to protect myself." I smiled. And that very night, I wrote a small document, 12-point checklist to protect older adults as my promise to them. 1. Always keep at least one separate account in your own name, no joint owner. 2. Make a will with an independent attorney as witness. 3. Review bank statements regularly. 4. Record or save every important medical consultation. 5. Don't sign anything if you feel pressured or hear, "We have to rush this for your health." 6. Choose your own doctor and lawyer. Don't rely on referrals from relatives with financial interests. 7. Keep copies of your ID and property titles in a safe place. 8. Use two-factor authentication for online accounts. 9. Teach younger family members how to spot signs of elder abuse. 10. If you suspect something, contact an attorney or protection organization right away. Don't stay silent. 11. Keep a financial journal and a log of medical visits. 12. And last, never think you're too old to say no. I hand out that checklist for free at community meetings, and every time I see an older man or woman accept it with a smile, I feel my heart heal a little more. At the end of spring, I wrote another letter to my grandkids. I know they bear no blame for the adult's tragedy. I love you, but love has to live with truth. When you grow up, remember that wealth isn't in a safe, it lives in gratitude and honesty. Never let greed cloud your eyes. I sent that letter with an old family photo, the only one still intact. That summer, I spent a day returning to Lisbon, but this time not as someone taken away in silence, rather as a free traveler. I visited Dona Teresa at Santa Luzia. She hugged me, tears running down. "You did it, Sylvia. You made us believe justice is real again." I smiled and handed her a small radio and a bouquet of fresh orange blossoms. "So you can hear the world out there and believe someone is listening." We sat on the balcony looking over the Tagus, sunlight gilding the water. For the first time, Lisbon was truly beautiful to me, not a prison but the end of fear. Back in Maine that night, I opened a drawer and found the letter I'd written the night before the inheritance signing, the one to Richard I had never burned. I read it again and smiled. The words in it had come true. I took the letter out to the back porch, set it in a ceramic bowl, and lit it. Flames rose, eating each line, casting warm light over my aging hands. I whispered, "It's time to let the past burn out." I watched until only ash was left, then closed the door. Night wind slipped through the window frame carrying the scent of peace. Now I am no longer someone deceived, abandoned, or treated as a burden. I am Sylvia Carver, the woman who stood up from her own funeral and walked out with 2 hands full of trust again. I sat down and wrote the final line in my journal. Justice doesn't make us young again, but it lets us hold our heads high. And sometimes, that alone is a kind of miracle. After the trial and the months rebuilding my life, I knew there was one last thing to do, not to close a chapter, but to open another path for people like me. One autumn morning, with dew still on the grass out back, I called Renee. "Do you remember the first time I asked for your help?" I said, my voice lighter. Renee laughed on the other end. "How could I forget? Do you want to revise some filings?" I answered, "No, Renee. I want to write a new will." That afternoon we sat at the wooden table in my living room. I read each line slowly, my voice firm like an oath. All current assets, including real property, savings, insurance, and damages with interest, will go to the Sylvia Carver Fund, a non-profit supporting older adults who are abused by relatives, isolated, or stripped of autonomy. Renee looked up, admiration in her eyes. "Are you sure? That's enough for you to live comfortably the rest of your life." I smiled gently. I have enough. But so many are still trapped in homes that are anything but. If this money can open a door for them, that's the real asset. In that will, I left each child $1 a token, not to punish, but to acknowledge they are my blood while making clear they no longer hold power in the name of love. I included a short handwritten note for each. "My dear children, I don't harbor hatred, but I can't pretend to forget. Real love must carry responsibility and honesty. One day, when you're brave enough to look back, understand that what I leave you isn't money, but a lesson in consequences." Renee nodded softly after reading. "You know, Sylvia, those letters may change them more than any sentence." I only smiled. I don't pin my hopes on awakenings, but I trust time, the fairest judge we have. Beyond the Sylvia Carver Fund, I set up a memorial scholarship in my late husband's name, the Richard Carver Memorial Scholarship for nursing students focusing on geriatrics. He used to say, "I told Renee that caring for older adults teaches you kindness." If someone enters this field out of love, I want them to know a woman named Sylvia Carver believed in them. When all the paperwork was done, I chose to leave the big house and start a smaller, quieter chapter. I bought a little home facing Casco Bay, just 2 bedrooms and a sunny balcony. I planted 2 cherry trees out front, one for me, one for Richard, and adopted a gray cat I named Harbor because he arrived on a windy day and curled up by the porch like he wanted to be someone's safe harbor. My new routine is simple and full. Morning, I wake at 6 a.m. and paddle a kayak along the bay in the mist. Midday, I read or write for elder advocacy groups. Afternoon, I practice. Watercolor, mostly Lisbon scenes, once a symbol of fear, now a symbol of freedom. Evening, I brew tea, open my laptop, and answer letters from strangers. Some ask how to find a lawyer, some just want to share that their grandkids don't call anymore. Each letter is a life, and I answer with all the patience I have. I learned something new too, how to cook Portuguese food. First dish, bacalhau à brás salt cod mixed with eggs and crisp potatoes. I learned the recipe from Dona Teresa, my friend at Santa Luzia. With the first bite, I remembered leaving the facility and her words, "Do what we didn't dare demand justice." Now the dish isn't tied to fear, it's gratitude. I call it the freedom dish. Every Sunday I go to a local church where the pastor leaves time at the end for community sharing. I tell my story not to seek pity, but to remind people, saying no isn't a lack of love. Sometimes it's the only way to keep love from becoming a weapon. Afterward, many elders come hold my hand for a long time. Some just cry. They don't need to speak. I understand because I've been in that place where your voice gets swallowed by family silence. One early winter evening, I sat on the porch watching moonlight ripple across the bay. Harbor curled under my chair. I thought about the years behind me and finally realized the hardest thing to forgive wasn't others' wrongs, it was not forgiving myself. I had believed the wrong people for too long and blamed myself for being weak. Now I know, weakness isn't a crime, only staying down is. I won't forgive cruelty, but I forgive myself, the woman who once believed kindness alone could hold a family together. That night I wrote in my notebook, I wasn't born strong. I learned strength after almost being erased from my own life. And I knew this is the story I want to leave behind, not just as a memoir, but as a map for anyone lost in fear. Renee helped me plan an open resources release, all forms, hotlines, support organizations, and the 12-point checklist shared free through a nationwide elder network. I set the release date for March 20th, exactly 2 years after my 71st birthday, the night everything seemed over but actually just began. That evening, after finishing the plan, I stepped onto the balcony. The lighthouse beams swept the bay. A light breeze carried the smell of salt. I spoke softly to Richard, as if he were beside me. See, we don't have to fear losing anymore. In the end, the only thing we keep is what we give away. Harbor rubbed my leg and meowed once. I smiled. In the end, my life found both justice and peace again. Early morning, the ocean breeze from Casco Bay blew across the porch, carrying salt and distant gulls. I poured a cup of black coffee, opened my worn notebook, and wrote the first line of my new book. A Guide to Preserving Dignity in Old Age, What I Learned After Nearly Being Erased from My Own Life. My pen trembled lightly, not from age, but emotion. I'm not writing as a victim, but as a survivor, someone who crossed the ravine of betrayal and returned with self-respect intact. In the middle of the first page, I drew a small circle for the sea, always changing, never lost. My life is the same. Waves can strip away reputation, but if we stand up, dignity returns like the tide. The breeze flipped a few old pages notes from the road I'd walked. I thought of Dona Teresa, who hugged me on my last day in Lisbon and said, "Live for those who no longer have the chance to stand." I thought of Lisbon, once a nightmare, now a landmark of freedom. But more than anything, I thought of the woman in the mirror, the one who didn't fall when the world thought she was dead. Each morning I smile at her, not to find youth, but to greet an old friend. Thank you for not giving up. This afternoon I sat in a sunlit room, opened my laptop, and rebuilt the climb. birthday night stage in words. I'm not writing to dwell on pain, but so others, those being abused, controlled, deceived, can see there's a way out. I described every detail: the pen scratching on paper, my daughter-in-law's icy voice, my son's empty nod. And finally, the moment I hit record, small act, life-changing result. I wrote slowly, line by line, like opening a door to light for someone else to walk through. On the shelf, Richard's photo smiled, his eyes catching the late sun. I said softly, "See, I'm home now, not just in this wooden house, but in the house of trust and justice." I walked through the house, checked windows, rearranged books and paintings, then locked the front door. I set the key ring in a small wooden box Richard had carved with the words, "Home is a choice." It's the symbol of the autonomy. I took back the right to decide how I live, who I trust, and where I stop. In the afternoon, I opened my laptop. My inbox filled with messages from everywhere. A woman in Texas weighing whether to remove her son from a joint account. A man in Florida saying my story gave him the courage to call the police after years of threats. I read them all and answered each one in the voice I once needed myself. Gentle but firm. Every line is a life. I realize strangers can understand me better than the family who betrayed me. Through them, I know I didn't just survive, I became a voice for those who were silent. At dusk, I stepped onto the balcony, where the sea turned a pale bronze. The last light sprinkled the water like glitter. I closed my eyes, breathed in the salt, and let my mind drift with the waves. I understood that true legacy isn't money, it's how we make wrongdoing, bow and goodness stand tall. I once had millions, then lost everything only to receive what matters most: freedom of the soul. If someone asks whether I regret anything, I'll say no. Without those losses, I'd never have learned the strength of reborn trust. Night fell. I set the laptop on the table and moved my fingers slowly. On the screen was the end of the manuscript. I typed the closing line. Preserving dignity in old age isn't just about protecting assets, it's about protecting your soul in life's storms. Then I saved and hit send draft to the publisher. Offshore, waves beat the rocks like a wordless song. I smiled, feeling the ocean blessing my journey. I whispered to myself, "This isn't an ending. It's the first chapter of peace." I closed the laptop, poured a little red wine, and leaned back in the wooden chair. The sea breeze lifted my silver hair, and Harbor, my small cat, slept at my feet. Everything was quiet, just enough to hear my heartbeat. Slow, steady, at peace. I looked up at the night sky, no clouds, only the moon and thousands of stars. Somewhere out there, someone is hearing this story, maybe a mother, a grandfather, or someone just learning how not to fall. And if they are, I want to say this: you're not alone. Even if you've been deceived, forgotten, or treated as a burden, you still deserve respect, trust, and love. If this story touched your heart, tell me where you're listening from. Every comment you leave is like a small light on a map, showing older people out there, those who feel lonely, hurt, or overlooked, that they are not walking alone. I want to thank you for staying to the very end, for listening to a woman who was pushed into the dark and chose to stand up anyway. A like, a comment, or a subscription won't just help this video travel, it will help other silent voices be found. If today this story made you cry, smile, or simply sit in quiet thought, then I believe that somewhere kindness still lives, and together we're keeping it alive.